Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first webinar of 2023. So happy New Year to you all. This is myself and Stanley, CEO and founder of Anicca Digital. And I'm really pleased to introduce Martin Broadhurst, who's joining us again to talk about ChatGPT. And we're going to be talking about chatting with robots. So happy New Year, Martin. Thank you for joining us. Are you on mute?
I was, and it took us slightly longer to unmute than I expected. But yeah, happy New Year to you too. Thanks for having me. Delighted to be back talking robots.
Well, we actually have known each other for about 15 years, but as part of the business club through the chamber, haven't we? And we were fellow chamber trainers on that particular program. So we reconnected again this year when you did a talk on AI, and it was something that I've been interested for about a year. And I thought, oh, Martin absolutely knows his stuff. So you came and spoke at Leicester Digital Live and then did another webinar. And then as soon as I saw ChatGPT announced and started to play with it, and my mind was blown, and I thought we've got to do something first week back. So I'm very grateful for you for joining us. So for the people that aren't familiar, what we do in our webinars is we quickly do a poll so we can understand the audience. And then I pass over to Martin and turn my camera off, and I'll be answering or trying to answer the chat. We'll be talking until about Martin will be talking to about 5 to 10. And then what we'll do is we'll have a bit of an FAQ, and then the video will be available later on. Have you loaded the handouts, Martin?
The handout is uploaded, or it should be, if I've done everything correctly.
Yeah, okay, I'll share that now. So you guys can go and find the handout top right. Please answer the questions ask any questions in the chat, and let's get kicking off with the poll. So let's do that now. So hopefully you should see this appear on your screen. You can tick more than one, and it's a nice, simple poll today. So which of the following AI technologies have you heard of or tried? I've not heard of any. Obviously, you've heard of ChatGPT because I've just told you about it. But prior to this event, have you heard any? I've heard of DALL-E, which is a mix between Salvador Dali, my favorite artist, and the film, the cartoon character WALL-E, and that's used for creating those incredible images from text. GPT-3, which is the text-based AI based on large language model, which I know Martin's going to talk about, which is the predecessor for the current one we're talking about today. Tools like Copy AI and Jasper, we actually use copy.ai. And then ChatGPT, I've heard of it, and then who's tried it. So looking at the numbers then. So I think there's only a couple of people who've not heard of any of them. 21% have heard of DALL-E. I mean, it's been all over the press. You can't escape the red panda on a motorcycle and similar crazy images. Then you've got about 14% have heard of the text-based AI. Interestingly, more people have heard of the tools. That's interesting, isn't it? So they're aware of the tools, but they don't realize the technology behind it. I think that's really interesting. And then about 20% have actually heard of ChatGPT, and only 25% have actually tried it. So they're in for a treat. So I'm going to pass over to you now, Martin. I'm going to turn my mic off, and I look forward to rejoining you in about 50 minutes. Thank you.
Great. Well, good morning, everybody. And thanks for joining us this morning as we talk all things AI, and in particular, the new tool from OpenAI, which is ChatGPT. I'm Martin Broadhurst, as you've just heard. So I'm a sales and marketing tech consultant in my day job, but over the last few years, really had a strong interest in artificial intelligence applications for marketing. So we're looking at different ways that we can implement AI as part of a digital marketing strategy, and just had a paper published in the Applied Marketing Analytics Journal that basically explains how businesses of any size can use AI as part of a digital marketing strategy. So there's a link at the end of the deck where you can click and read that article if you so wish. So that's a little bit about me. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Martin Broadhurst, FRSA, if you want to connect, or you can find me on Twitter, although I'm not very active on there at the moment. But yeah, you can find me on there at MP Broadhurst. Okay, so let's kick things off with this session by just having a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? An explainer, an overview of what we are talking about when it comes to artificial intelligence. When we think artificial intelligence, we often think of what is typically considered artificial general intelligence. We spring to mind robots that are capable of doing loads of different things, the kind of Terminator-esque. It can walk, talk, run, cook, dance. In the case of Terminator, murder, and we don't want that. But artificial intelligence, as it exists in the world today, is much less artificial general intelligence and actually very specific. When we think about AI, it can typically be broken down into kind of 6 main categories. Because what we have today is models that are capable of doing very specific tasks more efficiently, more effectively than humans when given lots of training data. But they can do one task very well, but when they start to venture outside of, that particular the thing that they've been trained to do, they lack that capability. So what are the 6 categories? Well, it's these that we've got on screen. First of all, we've got computer vision. Computer vision is what helps you unlock your phone if you use Face ID. It's what helps organize your photos if you use Google Photos or Apple Photos. If you type in photos, look for maybe photos of dogs. It's what brings up all of the photos that you've got in your albums of dogs. This has applications in the real world for kind of manufacturing, where they can use rapid imaging to detect errors or faults in products on production lines and things like that, or grading. You even see this with kind of grading of fruit and vegetables. Computers can be used to grade those, and that's a real world application of it. In the speech category, we've got speech generation, which is the kind of voice that you hear when you speak to your smart assistant. So when you say, "Hey Siri," and then you hear the voice respond, that's an AI generated voice. But we also have speech recognition, which is AI that can recognize your voice. Again, it's the voice. That's what happens with the smart speakers. It's AI is interpreting your voice. Expert systems are specialist systems designed to do, well, they can be built by companies to do very specific roles. We've got an example of those in a minute, which I'll talk about. Planning, scheduling, and optimization is an AI which is kind of how to maximize resource, time, effort, energy, kind of temporal. How do we make the most effective use of space in a warehouse, or route planning for a delivery driver, that kind of thing. Then we've got robotics, which is fairly self-explanatory. And then the last category that I want to talk about is natural language processing. Natural language processing falls into 2 main categories. Natural language processing, which is the ability to process language, that is to understand text, to parse text, to summarize text, to understand sentiment. And then another category, which is natural language generation. And that is the ability to generate text as if it was written by a human. And that's going to be one of the primary focuses of what we look at today. So these AIs, these very narrow but very capable AIs, are very much in the real world as today. If you've used Netflix and you've been on the home screen, you'll see all of those recommendations based on you and your profile. Now, this is an expert system. AI developed on huge amounts of data to create this personalization engine that recommends films and TV shows based on what Netflix understands people like you will like. In fact, it's so good that when you go into a family member or a friend's Netflix account, it can feel so alien that moment that you step in there. You're like, this doesn't feel right at all. It's very, and that's because the AI does such a good job. In fact, AI creates all of the artwork that you see for each title as well. And there's a really interesting research paper that Netflix published about how they optimize all of the different title artworks and how the process that they do for that. I'd highly recommend having a read of that. It's on their it's on the research blog of their website. If you use Google Maps or Apple Maps or Waze, I'm sure many of you do to get around these days, these use AI and machine learning to route plan. So they know the best routes for different times of day in different traffic conditions. If you use Waze, which is owned by Google, it was in a company that they bought, God, it was probably about a decade ago now. But this uses machine learning to aggressively optimize your routes. It will take you on the smallest little rat runs to get you around a little bit of traffic, but that's all done using huge amounts of data and machine learning. And of course, we have the smart assistants on our phone, on the smart speakers built into our computers. And these use all sorts of different AI technologies, from voice recognition, natural language processing, expert systems, and more. So AI is very much something that we use day to day in many of the products and services that we interact with. Now, most of these are built by companies that we know and interact with. So AI is now big business, and big business is investing heavily into AI. So Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, Nvidia, Meta, Amazon Web Services, Apple, who I haven't listed on there, they're all creating AI tools and machine learning tools and models that you can plug into, so you can now actually build on top of them. So if you're a software developer building products on the Google Cloud infrastructure, then there are lots of different AI tools such as computer imaging, voice recognition, natural language generation that you can API into and use their models, or even train your own models on top of their systems. Nvidia, which is the kind of computer graphics card company, that's what most people know them as. They are a huge player in the AI space, and they have basically gone all in on AI. So yeah, the interesting one. Watch this space in the future. One company that you may not be aware of on there is OpenAI, and we're going to look at those in quite a bit more detail today. But they published DALL-E. Now, do we have the results of that poll? Yeah, so I think 18% of you said that you'd heard of DALL-E. Now, if you've not heard of DALL-E, this is a text to image generator. So basically what you could do is you could write into DALL-E a prompt. And when we talk about AI, so I'm going to use the word prompt a lot. And when I say a prompt, it's a piece of text, it's an instruction from which you will then get an output by the AI. So in this example with DALL-E, we can say that the text prompt is a living room with 2 white armchairs and a painting of the Colosseum. The painting is mounted above a modern fireplace. And then you would just tell it to generate some images, and this is what it comes up with. So you can see here 12 different examples of living rooms with 2 armchairs, a fireplace, painting of the Colosseum. Now, all of these are entirely original. These are not copied. These are photorealistic images created exactly from that text description. What's really interesting is when you start to look at the detail of it. So it says a painting of the Colosseum. Within this picture that it is created, it has then created original pieces of art where you can see we've got kind of pop art style, modernist, classical. There's no abstract, but some that look like paintings. It's created original pieces of artwork of the Colosseum within the AI generated image itself. Now, OpenAI created this model, DALI, last year. So, in fact, no, it wasn't last year, 2021. I forget that we're in a 23 now. They announced this in 2021 and then released a public version of it in 2022 when they released DALI 2. And you can actually go and use this yourself. If you go to labs.openai.com, you can play around with this. You get some free credits, and then I think you pay $10 or $15, and you get 100 generations after that. But what they did with the update was they added some new capabilities. So in this particular example here with the Colosseum, this is just creating images from scratch. What they did with the new version was they added 2 new very powerful capabilities. I'm only going to show you one of them, but this is a painting that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. This is Vermeer's Girl with the Pearl Earring. And what OpenAI did was say, well, what about if we wanted to take an image that exists but expand out? We wanted to see the universe around that image. Could we get the AI to do that? And this is a technique called outpainting. And this is where we can see an example of outpainting, and it's created a whole new world outside of the original image. So we can finally see the world that Vermeer's Girl with the Pearl Earring was living in. Now, this all falls under a category known as generative AI. So what we've been doing there was creating images from text descriptions, but now we have new models which are creating things like videos from text descriptions as well, such as this example. Let's just show you this one here. So hopefully that played all right and you saw that video. So that sprouting plant looks like something from a David Attenborough documentary, but it is entirely AI generated, and it was from a text description. So like I said, this falls under the category of generative AI, and we're starting to see lots of different media formats enter the fray here. So we're seeing text to image, text to text, text to video, text to 3D model, text to music, and much more. So it's a very nascent technology. We really are at the kind of day one, so to speak, of this technology. But it is truly incredible. Now, all of those examples I just gave were text to something. So you had to write a description and then the AI will create it. And in order to generate something from a written description, the model must first understand language. And this is where something called the foundational model comes into play. Foundational models, or what we call large language models, these are huge models that are basically the AI's understanding of language. So let's take a look at some large language models. Many of you on today's session may be familiar with this screen. In fact, actually, I was expecting more of you to have been familiar with this screen, actually, from the poll. 25% of you have tried this. This is ChatGPT, which is the reason that we're having this this session today. So ChatGPT was recently released November 30th. It was released by OpenAI. It's an iteration of an existing model that they've created. It's kind of an optimized version of a model called GPT-3. And GPT-3 is a large language model, but this version, ChatGPT, has some interesting new features in that it's basically been designed as a robot that you can chat with back and forth. You can have a conversation. So it understands context of previous messages, which means that you can add follow-up points to your conversation. You can ask it to do something, and then you can say, oh yeah, that was good, but could you also make this change? And it will understand all of that context. It's also been trained in a way that it will decline inappropriate response. For instance, if you ask it to do something, I don't know, like racist, right? It will say, no, I'm not doing it. Now, as with all of these things, it's a work in progress. So, some things do slip through the net, but it's a very interesting piece of tech. As I say, it was built on it's kind of an optimized and iterated version of GPT-3, which is a foundational large language model, publicly available, that you can build upon. You can build it into your products and services, created by OpenAI. OpenAI is not the only large language model on the market. There are many companies entering into this space. Some of them are publicly available, and others are not. Some of them are only available to researchers who work in the AI space, for example. So GPT-3, or recently updated GPT 3.5, and ChatGPT are from OpenAI. It's widely expected that they're going to release a new version, which is going to be GPT-4. That's expected to come in Q1 this year, although there's no firm date on that. You'll see there NVIDIA, I've put NVIDIA. There's the first typo that I've spotted. There's always going to be one. NVIDIA have the Nemo Megatron. Facebook announced OPT 175B last year, which again, is only available to researchers at this stage. Google released have publicly announced Glam, Lambda, and Palm, which are different versions of these models. Lambda is a kind of chat-based model, supposed to be more powerful than ChatGPT, although we don't really have our hands on that. Big Science is an open sort of, they're looking at creating one called Bloom, which is a huge model similar to GPT-3 in its size, but it's going to be open sourced, which means people can basically adjust and fine-tune the model itself in new and interesting ways. And then there are 3 startups creating their own models. So AI21 has Jurassic. Cohere has a model which is, I believe, just called Cohere Large, Extra Large, and Small and Medium. And LF, which has Luminous, which is great for foreign language. So if you've got a European language and you want to do language generation with German, Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, I think it covers, Luminous is very good for that. Now you'll see on a couple of these, there are these numbers, 175B, or on the Megatron version, you can see it says 530B. These are the number of parameters in the model. It really is about the size of the data within the model. So this is a chart that shows you the size of large language models according to their parameters going back to 2018. You can see in 2022, the Megaton model was 530 billion parameters large. And GPT-3, which is incredibly powerful, is over here at 175. So it's a really big step change. Okay, but what are parameters? Well, you can think of parameters in a model as being the kind of knobs and levers that a model has available to it in order to make decisions and make predictions about the text that it's analyzing or generating. So the more parameters a model has, the more flexibility it has to kind of work with the data and to fit with the data. But it requires more data and computational resources to train, and the more parameters it has, it becomes more prone to something that's called overfitting, which is a machine learning outcome, which means that it's really good at working on and giving accurate data on training data, but not for new data. Anyway, that's a different thing. On the other hand, a model with smaller numbers of parameters may be simpler and require fewer resources, but it would be less accurate. And we've got an example of this that I'll show you coming up. Like what happens when you work with a model with fewer parameters or less power. I've got an example of that in a moment. Okay, so let's have a look at ChatGPT and OpenAI for a second. OpenAI was founded as originally it was Elon Musk was one of the original investors in the team, and it was a not-for-profit, but it's since switched to being a capped for-profit organization with the goal of ensuring artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. They've got hundreds of AI researchers tackling everything from language generation, audio generation. They've got some interesting research pieces on games and strategy. Their YouTube channel is fantastic. I highly recommend checking it out. Robotics and much more. But if people have heard of OpenAI at all, in recent weeks, it's likely due to this tool here, which is ChatGPT. Now, ChatGPT has some incredible powers, as I spoke about earlier. But it can also do what I consider, I've been in this space now for a few years, to be very standard run-of-the-mill text generation. You'd ask it to generate some text, and it will create a bit of text based on what you've asked it to do, which at this stage feels very passé in a very simple sense. For example, here you see, I asked it to write a poem about my love of doner kebabs in the style of a pre-Raphaelite poet. And this is what I got. Oh, doner kebab, so succulent and fine, in bread and salad you truly do shine, with mint and chili sauces, oh so divine, your smell and grease, so alluring and fine. I'm not going to read the rest of it, but yeah, there you go. There's a pre-Raphaelite style poem. To be honest, I wouldn't recognize it as being in a pre-Raphaelite style or not, to be honest. So ChatGPT is currently in a research phase. You'll see at the bottom it says free research preview. It isn't truly commercially available yet, unlike GPT-3. So if you see any tools out there that say they're built on ChatGPT, they aren't using an API, and at some point they're probably going to fall over and have to be redeveloped when they release this as a commercial tool. The interest has been huge. Millions of users testing it within weeks of its launch. And they are going to commercialize it at some point because the compute power is immense. So what else can it do then? You can ask it to write something like a poem and it will write a poem. But what else can we do with ChatGPT? Well, first of all, you can ask it to teach you to code. For example, this is one of the first things I did with it when I jumped into it. I thought, okay, I've heard that it has some interesting programming capabilities. If I don't know anything about coding Python, for instance, I could say to it, how can I learn Python? So you can see the format of it. For those of you who haven't seen how it works, I just went in and said, how can I learn Python? And it gives me this response. It says, great resources online, free and paid options. You could check out online courses like Udemy or Coursera, many forums and communities. Okay, that's great. Sure, I can. It's basically saying you can go online and research it. Okay, sure, that's fantastic. But what about if I wanted a good project for a beginner? So it says, can you recommend a good project for a beginner? And then it gives me a project that would be good, which is to create a game which is a guess the number game. And the computer starts by generating a random number between 1 and 10, and then the player will enter a number and they will be told higher or lower until they get it right. So it says It can help you practice variables, loops, and conditional statements in Python, and it's a fun and simple way to get started. Okay, that sounds interesting, but I still don't know how to do it. So then I say, show me how to complete the project with a code example. And it says, sure, here is a simple implementation of the guess the number game in Python. So it spits out the code with some markup and description telling me what it's doing at different stages. It comes up with a description at the bottom explaining the code, explaining the variables and the random number function and things like that. And then if I take that bit of code and stick it into a console, I can then run that piece of script, and guess what? The game works exactly as intended. So it can write and explain code very well. If you're a developer, this can really it can debug for you, which is quite interesting. I've seen some great uses for developers using it for debugging, but also I've seen developers saying, this tool and similar tools actually. So there's a tool called Copilot on I believe it's on GitHub, that will generate a script for you, and lots of people are using that to just speed up the work process. It's not necessarily doing the whole thing. You still got to know what you're doing. It still requires human in the loop, but it can certainly help make people more productive. Okay, so what else can it do? Well, it can write a cover letter for a job application. This is just an example that I was playing around with yesterday. I'm applying for a head of role. For a head of role. I'm applying for a role as head of digital marketing at AB Corporation, based in Nottingham. They require the following, and I've just taken some kind of person's specification bullet points from the job ad and stuck it in there, and I've not told it anything about me at all. So just with plain, I've given it nothing from me and just said, I'm a great candidate. Write me a powerful and compelling cover letter for my application. And this is what it spits out. So, dear hiring manager, blah, 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 blah. Right. So you can see that it's given me several paragraphs linked to these skills and, talking about what it's asked for. Now, lots of people, I'm sure many of you on this course today, will feel that it's easier to edit than create something from scratch. So it gives you a starting point. You might look at that and go, that isn't right, but you've got something that you can edit and hack. And you know what? You can actually, because of that capability of being able to go back and add follow-up prompts, you can get it to edit it for you. So that's exactly what I did. I said, that's great, but can you make it sound less boring and make me sound more exciting and like a digital marketing wizard? And it just starts to change the language. So the emphasis has changed. This paragraph, for instance, is an interesting one. It says, as a skilled communicator and problem solver with a growth mindset, I thrive in fast-paced entrepreneurial environments, comfortable managing multiple tasks and projects simultaneously. Now, if we compare that to the previous paragraph, it said, I am comfortable working in a fast-paced entrepreneurial environment with competing deadlines and priorities. So it's just changed the tone, the emphasis. It's just kind of zhuzhed it up a little bit according to what I asked it to do. This is great. This kind of capability is great for rewriting something in a different tone of voice, or even just getting rid of grammatical errors. Anne mentioned at the start that she's working on some documents recently and didn't feel that her writing style was always the best. So you can write something as good as you can make it, stick it into AI, and that will make it more consistent. It will rewrite, give you better different structures. It's really quite a powerful writing assistant. So summarization is another great feature as well. Summarizing text I think this is, again, really powerful. we're starting to see this being built into some interesting use cases, some of which I'll show you later. But summarization of text. This is a match report, so a sports report. I've taken it from the BBC. I've asked it to summarize a football match from the what game was it? Oh, it was Fulham beating Leicester City 1-0. Right, so this is the full match report, and I've just said summarize the match report and copied the whole thing in there. So if you've got an article and you just want the kind of top level highlights, and you want the detail but not the detail, like, if that makes sense, you can stick it in here and you get that as a summary. So Fulham defeated Leicester 1-0, Premier League match. Mitrovic scored the only goal, close range shot, receiving a cross from Willian. Fulham are 7th in the league, level with Liverpool, blah, blah, blah. So you get all of that context, the important stuff, without having to read the whole piece. Now, this is really interesting, particularly if you're, maybe you've got to present briefing notes to senior managers in your organization, or you've got to write an executive summary for a report that you're putting together. AI can do that. If you've done the legwork, AI can turn that into the kind of finished article. AI can also explain complex ideas simply. So you want to know something about, I don't know, let's take nuclear fusion. So what is nuclear fusion? And it will tell you in 3 paragraphs. Nuclear fusion is a process in which atomic nuclei combine to form heavy nucleus, releasing a large amount of energy in the process. This is the process that powers the sun. Limitless energy, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. But what about if I've read that and it started talking about atomic nuclei and combined mass of resulting nucleus is less of the sum of the individual masses of the original, E equals mc squared. Oh, I've read all of that and gone, I'm still out of my depth here. So I can say to it, explain it to an 8-year-old of average intellect. And then it says, sure, nuclear fusion is a way of making energy by combining tiny particles called atoms. When we burn things like wood or gasoline, chemical reaction, creating energy, we're using different kind of reaction to make energy, blah, blah, blah. So it starts to dumb it down, or explain it more simply for the audience that you've put in and said, yeah, I can do that. And if you want to make it even simpler, so I've said, make it super simple, so simple a toddler could grasp it. Okay, nuclear fusion is a way of making energy by combining very small particles called atoms. So it has a go. It certainly has a go. I still think that your toddler would need to be a pretty smart cookie to catch this explanation. But nonetheless, it's stripped back that explanation of nuclear fusion into one single simple paragraph, making it as simple as it can for you, the reader. And 5, what else can ChatGPT do? Well, it can spout very convincing bullshit. Here's the kicker. This actually came to light, I first heard it articulated by Cassie Kozakov, I think her name is, chief data scientist at Google, who wrote an excellent piece on Medium on this particular topic, and basically said that ChatGPT, is a bullshitter. So this is a somewhat forced example to illustrate that point, but I asked ChatGPT to write an article about Google's Power Max Pro AdWords update, which isn't a thing, right? It doesn't exist. But I asked it I want you to pretend you were the editor of Mashable.com, writing a lead article about this. So I've asked it to pretend to be someone and then write an article about this thing. Now, obviously, this is a forced example. I'm doing this I was trying to illustrate the point quickly, but I asked it to do that, and then it wrote me an article about this thing. So new updates for AdWords, Power Max Pro, set up to shake the world of digital advertising, new features, improved tools, easier for businesses to get the most out of advertising efforts, talks about machine learning algorithms to improve ad targeting, data analysis tools, see how ads are performing in real time, make adjustments. So it all sounds, sounds very convincing. Quotes that I've asked it to create. It has happily given me this article on this new product. Lots of words, all of it nonsense. And that's fine if, in this example, you've written your prompt knowing that it's going to write something nonsense. I've told it to write about something it doesn't know about. But what if you're writing, let's say you're an agency and you're creating blog content for a client, right? Who isn't a subject matter expert? Who's checking the output? Because it will write confidently about a subject, even if that subject does exist. But if it doesn't have the information in its training set, or the training is sparse, or the information it has is kind of limited, it won't come up with great examples. For instance, I was demoing this at an organization that does lots of work with Black British dance. Right? And when I showed them this, they said, ask it to write something about the history of Black British dance from 1940s through to 1970s. So we did, and it wrote several paragraphs, which to someone who knows nothing about that subject, such as myself, I would read it and go, oh, that makes sense. That stacks up. These are words that I recognize and themes that make sense to me. But somebody who knows the subject, in fact, someone who did know the subject in the room, saw that and went, that's all nonsense. So it can be quite, and this could be applied to anything from construction, science, health and fitness. It can just spout absolute nonsense in a convincing way. So it's essential that when using these tools, particularly if we're doing it for kind of research purposes, or we're using it as a writing assistant to create content that might even go on a website, it needs a human in the loop to check the content. AI will talk BS all day long, and it will do so quite happily, very confidently. Now, there's tons of other use cases that we could look at for ChatGPT. If you're interested in having a look, check out this slide. There's a link at the bottom to cookup.ai, a bunch of use cases covering everything from how to turn it into an assistant, how to use it for cooking, how to use it for games or fitness, to improve your grammar, to just improving your writing or programming, and more. But with that, I will say, just be careful, because it has some limitations, such as it may occasionally generate incorrect information, BS. It can produce harmful instructions or biased content based on the information that it's got in its system. And it has a limited knowledge of the world and events after 2021, because that's when the training data ends. It ends in September 2021. Okay, right. Let's have a look at the difference between ChatGPT and GPT-3. ChatGPT is a chat-based interface, much like we saw earlier. So we can go in and we can have multiple back and forth exchanges. This, we saw the example about creating a pre-Raphaelite poem. But this was already something that you could do using GPT-3. This is what it looks like in the OpenAI playground. The structure is different here. We don't have a back and forth chat-based interface. We just have this space that we can kind of write our instructions and then get outputs from it. But ultimately, it's very similar. You can see here, again, I've said I commissioned a poem from a popular poet in the pre-Raphaelite movement to write me a poem about my love of doner kebabs. I gave it a bit of context, and this is the output that it's given me. You'll see over here there are some additional settings that you don't get in ChatGPT. Well, one of the settings that you get is this, which is the model. You can choose which model of GPT you want to use. And you can think of the model as being like the engine in a car. While you might buy a BMW 3 Series, you get to choose whether you want the kind of small engine, the mid-size engine, maybe a hybrid engine, or the full sports mode, high performance, fully tuned engine. You can see here that there are 4 different engines or models: DaVinci, Curie, Babbage, and Ada. DaVinci is the full-throated, full throttle, horsepower, max performance engine. It gives you the best results you want to use it most of the time. Curie gives you good results at a fraction of the cost of DaVinci, but DaVinci costs aren't exactly high. Babbage and Ada are less well suited to instruction-based prompts and are better suited to things like text classification and parsing text. But they're very, 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 very cheap. You also have some additional settings over on that side, such as you can see here, temperature. You have maximum length, which is the length of the output that it generates, frequency, and penalty settings. Now, all of these are different ways of basically controlling the output. The creativity, how much openness or how much constraint you put on it. I just want to show you some different examples, all using the same prompt with these different models. So to demonstrate, let's see what they do with this simple prompt. Remember, not all of these models are designed for this particular task of what is called a zero-shot instruction. So I asked it here to write a short poem about my love of doner kebabs. DaVinci gives me this: a shawarma of veg and meat, my heart ne'er skips a beat, wrapped up in a pita bread, my long love of doner has been bred. So that's DaVinci, that's the high performance one. Curie gives me this: I love the tangy and savory flavor of doner kebabs. I love their juicy perfection, their perfect balances of spices. I love their grilled perfection, their crispy, succulent perfection. So you can start to see it's kind of repeating lines here: perfection, perfection, perfection. It's not as good as this one. Things start to go downhill when we get to Babbage. I love doner kebabs so much I could eat them every day. It's a hole in my stomach, but that's not a bad thing. Not entirely convinced that's a poem. But then it absolutely falls to pieces when we get to Ada, where we say, write a short poem about my love of doner kebabs. Kebabs are perfect for me. I love the way they make me feel. I can't help but purchase them. I am LGBT Denver doner kebab converter. It's just gibberish, but it's not designed for that task. But that's what I just wanted to demonstrate to you, just how ill-equipped they are for that task in hand. Right, we're running out of time, so I'm going to rush through some of these bits. If you'd like to know more about this principle, drop me an email afterwards. But what we can do with these models is we can train them to get better outputs. So we could have given it an example of lots of poems and then asked it to write a poem based on the examples that we gave it. On screen is an example that I have trained to create a press release. The instruction at the top, whether you can see that or not, it says write a press release to promote a news story for a business. And then I've given it 2 examples. The first example is here, where I've given it the theme, the topic, some key facts, and then it's written the press release here. And then here's the second example, where at the top I've given it the theme, the topics, and facts, and it's given me the outputs here. Then, using a very simple user interface, I can then fill in those 4 pieces of information quickly. So I can say, what's the topic, what's the theme of the press release, what are the key facts, and who are the key people, the CEO, managing director, whatever. And then I can ask it to create 1, 2, 3, 4 outputs. And because I've trained it on the kind of style that I want, you can see the outputs provided here. In fact, you can try this for yourself if you want. I've included a link to this. You can go and test my press release generator, and you can go over to this link, follow this link, put this password in, click the unlock generator, put this password in at the top, and you can give it a go yourself to see exactly how that works. But basically, if you've got pieces of content that you create time and time again, whether it's company reports, maybe there are certain email subject line styles that you like and you want to train it on that style, and then it will create more of those for your future campaigns, you can do that. You can fine tune a model so that it understands exactly what you're after and gives you better results going forward. So that's basically the difference between a zero-shot instruction or a zero-shot prompt, which was the example that we saw with the kebab poem. I just said, write me a kebab poem. Or you can do a one-shot or few-shot prompt where you give it some examples. So a one-shot is where you say, write me a thing, here's an example of the thing, and then it will do you another thing. Or you can give it several examples, and then it's the more examples you give it, the better it gets at understanding what you're aiming for. But yeah, if you want to try this out for yourself, you can head to this link, put this password in the unlock generator, and you can give it a go. It is limited to 200 generations in total. So, if you all go on and try it once, it will eventually max out and you won't be able to use it anymore. So what else is new in this world of generative AI? Well, one really interesting thing that's come out within the past 2 weeks is something called FactGPT, which is from a third-party provider. So I mentioned that ChatGPT is, in the words of the chief data scientist at Google, it is a bullshitter. So its training data only goes up to September 2021. So it has no knowledge about the world after that. And anything that it talks about after that date is just a fiction. It's making it up. And if it gets it right, it's through luck rather than being informed by any real data, because it just doesn't understand the world after that point. So you can see I've gone into ChatGPT and said, I'm a Derby County fan for my sins. Some of you probably sat on the other end of the call today going, boo. But I am, and I asked ChatGPT to describe the Derby County financial crisis that led to the club going into administration in September 2021. So obviously I was expecting it not to write something, and that's exactly what happened. It said, I'm sorry, not familiar with the financial crisis. My knowledge is cut off at 2021. Okay, so it says I can't do it. It knows its own limits. So that's no good. What about if I want to use AI to help me write about real world events, current real world events? Well, as of the 24th of December, you could use Longshot AI. Longshot AI is a tool that uses models like DaVinci. It's a copywriting tool like Jasper, like copy.ai, like lots of other copywriting tools, but they've created a tool called FactGPT. And this is incredible. I gave it the same prompt, describe the Derby County financial crisis that led to the club going into administration in 2021. And this is what it wrote. I can tell you that this is incredible. It's well sourced, it's accurate, and it's up to date. So this goes up to the detail that this has goes up to August this year. It actually could have gone more recent. In fact, the model successfully wrote a summary or an article about the World Cup final just one day after Messi lifted the trophy. Now it's available for you to try. You get 500 credits to have a play with it if you want for free. If you do that, I encourage you to click on the link in the slides. Just means I get a little bit of credit, a little bit of a kickback. I've been supporting these guys since they launched back in 2021. I love the work they're doing. They are really innovating in this space. So FactGPT is really good for real-time AI content generation. What's this example? Oh yeah, so this is a great example from, I had a call yesterday with Anne in preparation for our webinar, and I used a tool called Laxis, which took a transcript of that call. If you ever do sales calls, you maybe use Google Meet, maybe you use Zoom, something like that. You could use a tool like Laxis, Otter. There's loads of these tools out now. But Laxis have just this week released a summarization tool. So this is great. I got a summary of our call yesterday, which I can then copy and paste. If this was a sales call, for instance, I would copy and paste that into my CRM and use that as my notes for the meeting. and I don't have to do anything. I don't have to be sat there typing. It just captures all of the meeting discussion, turns it into an actionable summary, and I can copy and paste it into my CRM, saving me a lot of time. And then the last thing I wanted to show you is this announcement. In fact, it's not an announcement, it's a report. Microsoft has a commercial deal with OpenAI where they get access to the tech and to the product early. They invested $1 billion into OpenAI. And it's been reported that Microsoft is looking to integrate ChatGPT with the Bing search engine. So when people say ChatGPT could be a Google killer, maybe not in the way that people expect. So yeah, keep an eye out for that one coming soon. That's the end of the session from me. I finished. Oh, that's good. I'm just a minute over. If you're interested in more of my content or connecting with me, check out my blog. There are links in the handouts. You can check out my blog. Sign up for my newsletter, which goes out every other Friday morning. And if you want to read my recently published journal article on AI strategy for businesses, you can click on that link. You've got my email address there as well. So that's it from me. I'll hand over to Anne. And
Excellent. That was amazing. The comments have been, I think people are not, completely knocked over by this technology. Interestingly, somebody asked about the difference between AI and machine learning. I sort of put in a vague description and then actually put the ChatGPT's version in.
I'm fascinated.
And it actually wasn't anywhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be. So, I learned about machine learning when I was a scientist before I got into marketing. So I've been interested in this field for years and years and years. I thought
did you have have you got the description there? What did it?
Yeah, if you go back up, I'll re-type it in if you like. It's one of the questions is that can you use this sort of in an open way at the moment? You can, but you've got to keep on logging back into chat.open.ai to utilize it. I was hoping that we might be able to produce a widget or something on the website, but at the moment there's not an API to do that. I think the thing that you've not mentioned is how it works and why it isn't scraping the internet. So I found a couple of issues with it. Definitely anything that was in the last 2 years. So I asked about Performance Max and it gave me completely made it up. So if it is new, it will make it up, but it will bullshit you twice. So I asked it to explain what the A10 marketing framework for Stanley was. And I said, well, I don't think you've got this right because the 10 steps begin with an A, and then it just went on to bullshit again and just make up its own 10. So it can be a little bit problematic. I found it incredible for rewriting sentence. I put a load of bullet points in, but what I found it was really important is just to do a paragraph at a time. Because if you try to confuse too many things, it would sort of merge them and mix them up sometimes. Occasionally it would truncate and wouldn't finish, so you sometimes had to ask it to finish a paragraph. But the bit that I think will be most useful is if you like me and your English language skills aren't as professional as the rest of the team, you can put in a series of bullet points and it writes it into pretty good English. And then the other thing that I found incredibly useful over Christmas when I was writing this next book was just making stuff more succinct. I tend to write too much. So I always need somebody else to help me edit it down. So it was, as I said, it was like having a new tool. Like we take it for granted. We've got spreadsheets. We take it for granted. We've got search engines. And it's just an incredible tool. I'm a little bit concerned about what's going to happen in the future. So what we're going to do in the podcast is talk about some of the issues. So on that basis, why did Google not release Lambda so quickly? What's the politics behind that, do you think?
So Google's stance, particularly with any of their models to date. So for instance, they've actually released 2 research papers on the image generators like DALL-E. They've released two. They've got one called Imogen and one called Party. And the line that Google seems to consistently give around this, Lambda again, I think was the same, is that they're making you aware of it, but they're not releasing it to the public because they're aware of the harm that could be undertaken. There are ethical concerns that they need to be, then they kind of need to get right before they release it to the public. I think the truth of the matter is, with something like Lambda, ultimately their revenue stream comes from search, and if people are just speaking to a chatbot saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, tell me about this subject," where's the opportunity to serve an ad in that?
Yeah, exactly. And while we're still chatting, I'm just going to bring up a couple of review call outs so people can, please mention the webinars and also mention Martin in the review as well. So, it's really brilliant to thank him for doing that. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, and there's a couple of people that are jumping ahead really quickly, aren't they? So there's a search engine called you.com, I think. I think it's already tried to incorporate some chat technology into it. And Microsoft, obviously, that press release you've announced, that was 2 days ago. I mean, it's incredibly how quickly these things are moving. That Microsoft, because they have got part ownership in OpenAI, because the other main investor was Elon Musk, of course, wasn't he? That they will be able to release a search engine that utilizes this functionality as well. So that's really exciting. Yeah, I agree with you. I think the commercial side of Google is quite scary for them. And I know that they were a little bit knocked out by the response that it got in the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, there was lots of reports about them going code red.
Yeah.
But to be honest, they have a huge research team. And when you follow these communities, you see that the researchers, there's not huge amounts of companies offering AI ML researchers great packages. So they're going to move between these companies. They all know kind of what's going on. I think Google will have seen this coming for a long time. They'll have seen the power and the potential threat that a chat tool like this could have for their business, because they will have created and played and tested with their own version of it through the likes of Lambda. So it will be interesting to see how all of these things get commercialized.
Yeah, and I mean, we're currently paying £40 a month, I think it is, for copy.ai. But the functionality I've seen so far in ChatGPT almost negates the need for that. So it'd be interesting to see whether these commercial tools, how quickly they will absorb this new technology. I know that one of my colleagues in the industry, ex-Majestic guy, Dixon Jones, he's incorporated some of this in his InLinks product already. So people are moving really quickly, and that's what's been the shock to me. But I do think people that I like you. I've been looking at this for 2 years now, and I was always concerned that it would have a big impact on things like copywriting and PR and text stuff. But the creative side, I thought they would escape. But we were talking about how you can almost design a website from scratch. So I know we've gone over the 10 minutes, but I think people would be really interested in that. But before we do that, talk about the website side. John's asked, have you developed a template to ask it for certain types task in a better way, for example, by following the foreign parameters? I think if you play around with the chat GPT, not the actual original GPT-3, you'd be shocked just how much it can do. But if you want to do something sophisticated and create a tool, that's where you need to go back to GPT-3, really, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. You're right. In ChatGPT, you can craft the prompts in such a way. You can actually almost give it the fine-tuning data by putting in the examples within your prompt. But if you wanted something that you can consistently use time and again, and maybe even build into a product or a web application yourself, ChatGPT, sorry, wrong one. GPT-3 is where you want to do that.
And before you talk about the website, there is a couple of questions. So Has GPT, I have to think of motorbikes and GP before I can get it right. Does it work in any other languages apart from English?
So it's been trained primarily on English, but basically, if you think of the way that it's, again, going back to the training data, what they've basically done is fed it the internet up to September 2021. So the corpus of text that it contains has huge amounts of other languages within it because it has basically scraped the internet. So foreign language speakers, it is able to translate at a decent level, but it hasn't been designed purely as foreign language. But yeah, it does work in other languages as well.
And one of the things that a lot of people are concerned about is that you're just going to get even more volumes of crappy content on the websites as people write blog, instead of writing one blog a week, which they're actually spent a decent amount of time doing, they just produce one crappy blog a day, or blog that really maybe Google or a user might not be able to tell the difference, and what the concern is of how that will affect search engines. So I know that Google released the useful content update earlier on in the year to sort of preempt some of this. But another question earlier on was, at the moment, and a lot of people are worried about using it in schools and people cheating. At the moment, there's not like a watermark or a way of differentiating it, but they are working on that, aren't they? So I don't know
they have it. It sounds like it's a real technical challenge to overcome. Yeah, we'll see where that leads to. I think it won't take long, because let's take ChatGPT or that's a proprietary model at the moment. That's OpenAI's model. But as I mentioned, there are these other foundational models that are coming out. So Bloom is an open source model. You've got the Megaton one, which from NVIDIA and Microsoft. There are going to be different versions of these coming onto the market. When there are open source communities developing these and working on them, there will be some that don't have watermarks.
Yeah,
there just will be. So whilst I think it's really good that that companies are trying to make sure that, not plagiarism, that's the wrong word, but AI generated text can be detected. As with all of these things, it's a bit of an arms race. There'll always be a kind of one side.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And you don't, and I mean, based on my learnings of it, you don't take it fully as it comes out anyway. You have to edit it, combine different sections. And if you haven't got the whole structure, the actual, you don't know your stuff, as you said, it will just give you an article that doesn't make any sense at all. So you have to know the topic in order to be able to write it. In the last 5 minutes, can you just talk about the big science, which is the Bloom, and the Hugging Face, is it, you were talking to me about, which is like a GitHub quite equivalent for AI scripts and things you were talking about?
Yeah, so Hugging Face is it's an online community for AI researchers and people that are interested in AI to share their projects. So you'll see it's kind of a GitHub for AI. You'll see people posting their projects on there with the descriptions. They might post a code base on there as well, with some live examples. So there's loads of interesting projects that you can go on there, and it goes into all areas of AI ML. So one of the projects that has had a lot of interest recently is a project called Stable Diffusion. Now, Stable Diffusion is an open source version of DALL-E, the image generator that we saw earlier in the session. Stable Diffusion is open source, so people can kind of fine tune it and create slightly different versions of it and release them. And there was an example project that someone put together last week, or maybe just before Christmas, I can't remember, where they'd basically trained it on lots of examples on website design. So given it loads of landing pages and home pages and things like that. And then they were able to just say, with a text prompt, write me a landing page for a lifestyle product. They might describe the product, bar of soap, whatever. Give it a description with colors and styling, and just give it as much text steer as they could. And then it created a design for them. In fact, it created several of them. And from that design, they're able to then use that as inspiration to go off and create something separately. Now, what's interesting at the moment, that's just creating a flat JPEG image. But it won't be long before you'll have a multimodal model which can create all of the individual assets. So you'll say, create me the design, and then you'll say, okay, give me the text as a text file, correctly structured. Give me the HTML. Give me the style sheet. Give me the individual assets, the icons, the banner images, and it will basically create everything for you, and it will spit it out. I genuinely don't think that's going to be too far down the line.
I reckon within the next 6 months, the way that it's moving. I mean, and also it can code it for you as well.
Well, exactly. It will give you all of the HTML, the CSS, the JavaScript. You'll be able to describe the interactive elements that you want, and it will spit it out. It's it's so close to that now. It's just all the different assets. The images sit in this model over here. The code sits in this model over here. When they create a truly multimodal model, that is to say, a model that can work with images, text, code,
video, music,
yeah, exactly, all in one place, that's where we're going to get a lot closer to a true artificial general intelligence.
Well, look, guys, thank you so much for that, Martin. We're going to carry on our chat offline. So what Anicca's going to be doing is we're going to be recording our first podcast on this subject. We are using new separate technology to do that, which will follow up each webinar. And then we're hoping that if everything goes according to plan, we'll be releasing that next week. Our next webinar next Friday is actually on getting your creative strategy for 2023. But I'm hoping that the podcast will be released on Thursday according to plan, where we're going to discuss some of the more controversial elements of this and some of the more exciting elements of this actually offline rather than doing the presentation. So it's almost like the postscript of the webinar. So yeah, we've had some amazing comments. I agree with a lot of what people are saying. This is really going to change things, and hopefully you'll find something that will be useful for you. So go and have a play. You'll get the video with all the links and everything in a couple of hours' time. And just thanks, Martin, very much. What a great start to 2023. What a great webinar. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Thanks for having me. And thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everybody. See you next Friday. Bye-bye.